and welcome to Book Lust. I'm Nancy Pearl. My guest today at University Bookstore is novelist and screenwriter Maria Semple. Her new book, Today Will Be Different, is just hitting the bookstore shelves now. Maria, so nice of you to come by.
It's great to be here.
I have very excited about your new book, which I greatly enjoyed. But I wanted to talk to you, if it's okay, about process, about your writing process. And is that all right?
It's so good. I can't tell you. It makes me very happy that someone's interested in this.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Good. So one of the things that struck me, I mean, your first novel, This One Is Mine, was not as big a success as your second novel, Where'd You Go Bernadette,
right,
which is now, as we see at the bookstore, in 3 different sizes,
yes,
paperback, trade paper, and as you said, Baby Bear,
yes,
in mass market paperback, all with the same great cover, though.
Yes.
People loved that book, and a lot of people read it. And you know, book clubs. I'm sure you visited lots of book clubs,
yes,
virtually, if not in person. Did this great success of that novel make the third novel harder to write, or did it free you up in some way?
It did neither, I would say. Is that it was important for me to get back to beginner's mind, because I think that something that people don't understand is novels do not get easier. That you really have to start from the beginning and invent every novel when you start writing it. The idea of, I've done 2, the third one will be easier, it really isn't. You're strangely starting at the same blank page. And the only thing that I think, the only way that writing other books helped me, but I would say even my background as a TV writer helped me with this, is just that with hard work it's going to get there. That's it. It doesn't help you in any other way other than you just think, okay, it's going to get there. And I think that also writing a lot does develop your intuition, and I would say that that's a really important part of experience, is that I think that I probably end up making the right decision more frequently now than I would in the past. Is I think that a lot of times you go down a lot of dead ends and waste a lot of time on it and maybe don't know that you're on a dead end. I've had 2 books that I've abandoned because they were just, the whole concept was a dead end. And so I think that you need those dead ends to develop your intuition. And then you go, okay, that didn't work. And it's not even like you try to learn from the dead ends in any concrete way. It's just on some very spooky, deep down sense, you're then able to kind of make the right decisions with a higher success rate.
Yeah, so it's as though when you were working on something, there's this voice in your head maybe that says, oh, that's not working. Is that?
Yes, and that the things that, to me, it's more positive than that. It's more, this is exciting to me. That you're drawn towards the stuff that just suddenly gets a fiendish look on your face,
right,
and you think, oh gosh, could I really do that? That would be crazy. That would be fun. And then you get this kind of energy, and that's when I know that I'm on the right track. And so the thing that I did that I think really helped me write the new book was that I stopped talking about Bernadette, and that because I would maybe have a false start with a new book, and then I would go maybe to a book club, or I would go give a talk or kind of a one-off thing.
Right.
And then I was interacting with people who loved Bernadette so much that I would go, oh my God, they're gonna, I can never do that again.
Yeah.
Because also you don't know how you did it the first time.
Right.
I feel like I'm the same writer as I was who wrote This One Is Mine. I'm the same person. And I didn't really change anything that much. And so as obviously I wrote it, but I don't quite know how it touched a nerve. And I think you don't want to know how it touched a nerve. I think you want that to be mysterious. And so I felt like I like to not feel like there's a lot of pressure on me, or the eyes are on me, or anything like that. Like I would never be a goalie, in soccer. I would, I don't want anyone.
I don't want to be an anonymous midfielder.
Complete anonymous midfielder, and that really is where I think the real power. I think that's the power play in life is to be anonymous and to tolerate be able to be anonymous, and as an artist, you know, and I've actually written a lot about that, and that Bernadette really kind of goes from feeling special and one of a kind to becoming anonymous, and that's I ended Where'd You Go Bernadette very intentionally with the line, and I will be always Mom. You know, and I wanted it to go into her just kind of almost melting away into just motherhood and just being like a mom. And so for me, it was important for me when I started writing Today Will Be Different, that I wanted just to put Bernadette in the past and not feel like anyone was waiting for the book or wanted to read it, and so I could just have some fun.
Do you consider yourself a comic novelist, or is that just your personality coming out in your writing?
I think it's that. I struggle with the comic novelist thing only because I think I need to get over it, but I know people I think who are much funnier than I am, and I feel like it's in kind of bad taste for me to put myself up on that level, but I really know that what I do is funny just because everyone talks about it and they say how much they're laughing, which is great and which I appreciate. And it's not like I've written something serious that they're laughing at. But I would say the thing that I'm going for is not exactly comedy. I think that does come naturally. I think I'm actually trying to write about truth, and I'm trying to write it in a rhythm that I think is fun for the reader. And I think that kind of adds up to comedy, because I do think I do naturally have kind of a wicked eye.
Talk about the rhythm.
Well, the rhythm is something that I feel does come from comedy writing, and of all people who I really associate rhythm with, it's Philip Roth, who was one of my favorite early writers, and that these long paragraphs and rants, and I think of Philip Roth as really being the king of the change-up, where I think in Operation Shylock that I remember loving, and he does this in American Pastoral, he does this in a lot of his novels, but where in Operation Shylock, I just remember being really struck by this. He goes on for 3 or 4 pages about how great it would be to end Israel and for all the Jews to return to Europe, and what a great idea that would be, and all the reasons, and you're reading and you're like, wow, that would be such a great thing, is return all the Jews to the cities of Europe where they belong, and then immediately is like, you think all the Jews should be returned to the great cities of Europe, how dare you, you know, and just the way that he sucks you in and then pulls
the rug out
from under you, and as a reader, that's such a thrilling experience, and he does it so many times in so many different ways, and so that, and also I like that his language is pretty simple, you know, that it's very I think he doesn't use really fancy words, and he doesn't use really kind of convoluted, twisty language. It's all pretty straight up. And I think that he really does rely on the rhythm and the change up. And so more than anybody, I feel influenced by him. And a lot of times he doesn't necessarily do it for comedy. A lot of times there is comedy in it, but it's more just it's like almost being in an ocean when you read him, and you're just getting kind of pulled around, and I feel like I'm in such good hands with him that I'll let him pull the rug out from under me, you know, and it's always so tricky. So I think that that's what I mean by the music of it. And so when I'm writing something, I think I will instinctively go one way, and then just to delight myself and to just kind of mess with the reader, I'll just quickly pull the rug out. And I do actually, like I say, I think that I'm more influenced by Philip Roth than a comic, you know, who I'm sure comics would sit here and say that that's what they do too, but I just got it from a different place.
Well, John Irving famously said that he doesn't start a book until he knows the last line of the book.
I know, that's so crazy, yeah.
So how do you, but so what about you?
Well, I wouldn't do anything that strict. And I think he's even said that the sentences just come to him.
Yes.
Like, it's not even like he's thinking about it. He'd like be driving in his car, and then some line will come to him, and he'll know that that's the end of his novel. So that's just a whole other level that I don't understand. That said, think it's really important to know the ending of your book, because I think you need to be writing towards something. And so I definitely do that. And in terms of the last line, I mean, in Bernadette, I did know pretty early on what the last line was. Once I understood the character, and I think the last line to me always has to do with the character arc. You know, it has to do with, it's not about language, it's about where do you need the character to land? And then you work backwards from that. And so as I was kind of creating Bernadette, I realized that her tragic flaw was that she thought she was better than everybody else. She wanted to be, it was important for her to be seen as being better than everybody else. And when in her past her house was destroyed and that was taken away from her, she just couldn't cope anymore. She had no coping mechanisms now that she wasn't the better than everybody. And so I really constructed the whole book around that. You know, her nemesis was Audrey, who was kind of one of the people. Community, you know, was the real enemy of Bernadette. Canada she couldn't stand because everyone kind of saw themselves as equal. And to her
like
that
Australia.
was exactly. And so that was kryptonite to her. You know, so I knew, because I'm really only thinking about the character, and so that's why I knew it had to end with her kind of resigning herself to and learning to tolerate just being mom, you know. And with this book, I will say, just to keep rambling, is in Today Will Be Different, I did know what the last line of the book would be once I wrote the first page of the book. And I don't want to give it away, but once I wrote the first page of the book, I realized, oh, now I know what the last page of the book has to be. And then that seemed like such a cool, impossible challenge that I had
to get there.
To get there, you know,
first line to last line.
And to have it be satisfying, because if I could see how in my concept to start the book and end the book the way that I did, it would almost be the definition of unsatisfying, you know. But I thought, wow, how do I do that yet make it satisfying? So that got very exciting for me.
So I was very interested that you described Bernadette's fatal flaw, which we normally think of as like Sophocles and you know, Shakespearean, and it's wonderful to think of how it does apply to many characters that we read in fiction.
Yes.
So who would you say, or what would you say is the fatal flaw of the main character, unless you think that's giving too much away?
No, it's not.
I didn't think it was.
Right, no,
but, okay.
It's not. So the protagonist of the new book, Today Will Be Different, her name is Eleanor Flood, and she definitely has a fatal flaw, which is self-will. She starts out the book, today will be different. Today I will be present. You know, the book starts with this incantation.
Back to my husband.
Exactly.
I will be a good mom.
I will be a good mother. And it's kind of trying to self-will her way into happiness. And as a friend of mine said when I told her the title of the book, is she said, already if you're starting your day that way, you're screwed. You know, if you're starting the day by saying today will be different, it's a setup. You know that you're in trouble. Yeah, that you're in trouble, that you're even thinking that way, you know. And so to me, self-will was her coping mechanism, and that is the flaw. And then the book, without giving too much away, but you'll know what I mean, then goes to the opposite of self-will, which is like letting go, and that it's non-attachment, it's God's will, it's the Tao, you know, all these different versions of let go. And so I knew that would be the journey, right? That you can't start her in the same place. And so that's why it was particularly tricky to end the book the way that I did. How do I end it with it also representing the opposite of self-will? And I do think that at the end there's been an adjustment where self-will, she realizes, has not worked for her, and she's going to try something else.
And do you have an idea of what she's going to try? I don't know if you like these kinds of discussions, but I love books where you
Yes.
can, where you think about, well, what's going to be next for the character?
Yes.
Where is the character going to go?
I do know. I feel like I can answer that.
Oh, that's great.
What's going to happen to her the next day?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel pretty clearly that I understand what the next day would be.
Because I thought maybe she'd become a meditator,
That's right. Well, nothing too big. I mean, I think that that's kind of what I was writing about in the book without really writing about it directly. But I think it was what I struggle with, which is, especially as we get older, you see people maybe you haven't seen for 20 years, and I feel like I've really grown, and they're like, "You're just the same."
Yeah, right.
And you're thinking, "Wait, is that a good thing or a bad thing?" I think I want to
Right.
grow. But even if you have grown and you've put a lot of work into yourself and therapy and all the different paths you take to change,
Yeah.
wherever you go, there you
Right,
are. You're always
right.
yourself. And so I don't know the answer. Is that good? Is it bad? And so I think
Right.
I was just kind of always writing about that in the book.
Well, you made a decision, I assume pretty early on, that the novel would take place over the course of one day.
Yes.
When did that idea come, or that decision?
Well, the first day I decided to work on a new book, I went to we live in an apartment, and then we also have an apartment down the hall that's our writing studio. And so I went down to the studio and I sat with my yellow pad, and I thought, what is going on in my life, and what is the thing that I don't want people to know about me, but that I have a weird compulsion about. And I almost wrote the exact first page of the book. And I wrote that, and I didn't even know that would be the first page of the book, but it was almost exactly the first page of the book with some names changed. And I looked at it, and it just really had this crazy, spooky energy. And I thought, wow, I think that's the title of my book, and I think that's my book.
Wow.
And once I wrote the first page, and literally the first line, "Today will be different," I thought, oh, here we go. I'm writing a book that takes place in a day, which I can't even tell you is my favorite type of book. Now, I say that where maybe my favorite book of all time is Billy Lynn's Long Halftime
Yeah,
Walk. So
right.
it's just, books are so crazy that way. You think
Yeah.
you don't like something, and I can't stand books that take place in a day,
Right.
but wait,
Right.
my favorite book takes place in a day. So
Yeah.
it depends on the book, And so the hardest thing for me, once I realized that was what I was now on a path to do, was to make it dramatic, because what stakes can happen in a day?
Right.
How can I write a page turner in a day? And I'm really all about the page turning, And so it was, how do you give it enough story, yet write a credible book about a day in
The life of
an ordinary person's
right.
an ordinary day.
Right.
For a person. Obviously, it has to be extraordinary, because otherwise you wouldn't write about it, but without it being just totally wacky.
Or extraordinary to her.
Yes.
It has to be extraordinary to her.
Exactly.
And
From the outside, not really.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the reader has to buy in, has to find the character believable enough
Yes.
to buy in that this is an extraordinary day.
Exactly, and feel
Yeah.
like there's enough of them in the character that they're wanting to see that the choices actually have some resonance. The what she's choosing to do, that there are some stakes involved in the choices she makes.
Do you write your novels like a big rough first draft and then go back and edit?
Yes, it's definitely from beginning to end as I write it, because I'm really all about the story. I will always have an outline going at the same time as my book, which is as my draft. It's certainly the first draft. So I'll be writing the first draft, knowing kind of the things I need to hit, and knowing what I need to kind of cast forward in terms of suspense or things that
Right.
I need to kind of always be teasing. And then in the course of maybe writing a scene or something, there'll be an interesting character I'll think, oh, this character's so interesting, just note to self on the outline, make sure the character comes back at some point. So I'm always working on the story and the draft. But the story is really maybe 1 or 2 pages, just kind of bullet points that I actually do type up, but I usually write a scrawl all over it by hand, and then every maybe week I'll then put all that stuff into the Word document and just print it out and keep it next to my computer just to make notes on again. But so, yeah, I really like writing a first draft, and I think it should be a fast draft from beginning to end and just get it down. And I try not to edit it too much in the first draft. Like it's just forward. I think the biggest trap there is to edit is basically editing, I would say, too early. I think that editing is so easy, and I always say to my students, editing is the reward. You know, editing it's so fun, you know, to just fiddle with lines, and that's always going to be there. You know what I mean? You're never, unless you have like a stroke or something, you're going to be able to realize, oh, I've repeated that word in 2 different sentences, let me change it. Like that I think is procrastination, and it's actually really destructive. Like I'm super down on it, and so I actually don't allow myself to do that. I say to my students, like, resist the urge to line edit, you know, except for when the time comes when you do need a line edit. But then you're then like over the hill, and it's like, whee! You just get to, that's like the most fun in the world is line editing. That truly is the reward. So I think give yourself something to reward yourself with is the line editing.
Do you have a first reader? And at what point do you show them?
Well, this book, Today Will Be Different, was different in that I had got an advance for it, which I had never done before. And what that did, which I don't know that I would do it again this way, but it made me feel like my first readers should be my editor and my agent. And normally, particularly the editor doesn't see a draft of maybe the 7th or the 8th draft, you know, because I actually really like just regular readers. You know, I find like another mother at school or an old friend of mine, and somebody who's just a reader who I talk books with. I will say, will you just read this? Because all I need, and I think all anyone really needs, is things that is to be pointed out what things don't make sense. I think that's really all, and that's so helpful. I mean, I would, these people, are going to be in my will. I mean, I'm not even joking. The people who have told me about things in my first drafts that don't make sense, that I never would have caught, because you do have blind spots. And so I think that you need another set of eyes just to tell you, oh, this part's slow, this is confusing, and maybe big character stuff. You know, this character, I don't like it. Why doesn't she just leave her husband if he's a jerk? Or, you know, that type of stuff. So you want those basic, big, crude notes. And then I go to work on how to do it. But I felt like having my agent and my editors, my first readers, and they were really good first readers, I will say, but the problem is, especially with an editor, is then you feel like you get put on the publishing timetable machine, you know, and I think that maybe when I normally would give a draft to an early reader, do a rewrite, then I would try to take a month or 2 off and just try to be really fresh about it and read it fresh. You know, once you're kind of on the schedule, you don't get that much time off. So that was the only thing. But I have my readers, and I really just read, I want them to read it for clarity particularly. And I think that it's important to get it as good as you can get it for readers. Like, I really don't understand people who just give sloppy stuff to readers. And I can't stand it when people give that to me, because I think it's insulting, because what you find yourself in these conversations where I'll say, oh, they're in Switzerland and it doesn't feel like Switzerland. Oh yeah, well, I'm going to put that in later. I'm going to do all that Switzerland research later, and then in the next draft, and it just becomes a fruitless conversation for both sides. So I try to make it really good.
In the editing, you know, there's that famous phrase, "Kill your darlings."
Yes.
Does that? Do you want to explain that?
Yes, it's a screenwriting. I think it's William Goldman, isn't it? I think he
wrote.
wrote.
Is it William? Oh, that would make sense.
Maybe, I think, or maybe it's, but maybe I've always heard it as William Goldman's "Kill Your Darlings." Is that But it's that you have, that if there's something you're in love with, if it's a line or a scene
Right.
or something, part of the process is you have to cut it. At some point you have to do it. It's just part of being a writer. It's part of being an adult and a realist as a writer, is to kill your darlings.
And I always think about it in terms of self-indulgence.
Yes.
You know, that there are parts, I would suspect every writer, you know, at times in their books, they're very self-indulgent. I mean, they're putting
yeah.
something in,
Sure.
using a particular word or putting something in just because they love it.
Yes.
And
yes.
that's what you have to be on the alert for.
And I think that a lot of that is what I call first draft-itis. You know, I think, look, if that's what gets you to get your first draft written, that you indulge yourself and you're just in love with some concept that maybe
Right.
doesn't make sense or maybe doesn't really go with the character.
Yeah, or belongs in a totally different book
Yeah, exactly.
yet to be written.
That's right. Then you know what? Go for it. I'm
Right.
just saying, go for it. Get to the end. You know, if you don't get to the end, you've lost the battle before you even started. So I feel like whatever it takes to get to the first draft, and I think maybe even the second or the third draft, but at some point, you know, it can stay in. But at some point, and this is a part that I love, is where you do separate yourself from it, and you have to, almost like a surgeon, just think of it as this body on the table. You know, surgeons
Right.
don't say, "Oh, that sweet mom of three." You know, it's just like the parts.
Cut it out.
Exactly. And so at some point you have to sit there, and that's why I think the time helps, to just take some time away and you look at it and you just say, okay, this jumps out at me for, you know, it's too long, or the tone is wrong, and you do have to. I'm all about the X's through the page, you know, and that's the thing. Being a TV writer, that's all you did day and night, is jokes that you thought were hilarious that didn't play, or that someone was offended by, or someone for some political reason in the room had a joke they wanted, and you just, I have no ego about that at this point, in a very healthy way, I think. So I'm not going to go that far out of my way to keep something that I'm in love with, because I really want the book to work, you know. And at some point, what happens, and all writers talk about this, it's really kind of crazy, and you think it's so pretentious until it happens to you, is that you write a book, you're totally in control of it, it's everything you've thought of, and then you take some time away and you read it, and it's actually this very different book from what you thought it was. As you go, wow, this book is something completely different than what I thought I was writing. And that's when the surgeon comes in. You're like, okay, so this is what it is. There's all these kind of strange repeating imagery that I had no idea I was doing, but obviously there's something the book is trying to tell me, and that's when you come in, and I think that's when you kill your darlings, you know, because a lot of times that stuff doesn't belong.
Well, Maria, it's just been a delight. The time has flown. Thank you again for coming on Book List.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a real honor.